Welcome back to Channel 4 Wrestling News. I'm your host, Ian, and by the end of this video, you will be completely up to date with everything that is making headlines in the world of pro wrestling. And we absolutely have to start off with last night's edition of AEW Dynamite, and we'll start with an injury update on Orange Cassidy. So, Orange Cassidy was injured last night. He was wrestling Pac. This was a #1 contendership match, with the winner going on to face Kenny Omega for the title at Double or Nothing on May 30th. Orange Cassidy went into the match ranked #1 in the men's singles division. Pac ranked #2. In our video last week, we had talked about how both guys were undefeated in singles matches in 2021. For Pac, he's undefeated in singles matches going all the way back before the pandemic. So during this match, Pac has Orange Cassidy up for a powerbomb, delivers a sit-out powerbomb, and it looked like Orange landed pretty heavy on his head and neck. He had also been hit by a super kick moments earlier that apparently rocked him quite a bit and played into what happened. So it was fairly obvious that Orange was hurt during the pin attempt. After the 2 count, he really gave like a feeble, weak-looking rollover to get his shoulder up off the mat, and it seemed pretty obvious at that point that something was wrong with Orange. So there was a lot of stalling at that point. Orange rolled to the outside. At one point, Pac just kind of put him in a headlock. They went to commercial. This was in picture-in-picture. Don Callis comes out. Don Callis starts doing some stalling, and while he's talking, Kenny Omega comes up into the ring and clobbers Pac with the title belt from behind. So now you've got Orange Cassidy, who's already on the ground. Now Pac is knocked out too. Aubrey Edwards puts the double 10 count to them. They're both out, and the match is declared a draw. So Don Callis and Kenny Omega start celebrating because they believe that since there is no #1 contender, they will simply just have the night off at Double or Nothing. Right? Because that happens so often in wrestling, right? Like, oh, there's no #1 contender declared, so the champion just gets the night off. Then Tony Schiavone came out and announced, no, that's not going to happen for the first time in wrestling ever. You will defend your title on the pay-per-view, and you'll defend it against both Pac and Orange Cassidy. So there are some updates regarding what happened and Orange Cassidy's condition. They're both coming from anonymous source-based websites. So PW Insider reported that Cassidy was seemingly fine backstage. He was seen socializing with people, and the people that they talked to said they don't expect Orange Cassidy to miss the pay-per-view. He should be fine, good to go, cleared in time for the pay-per-view. Now, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer, he also gave an update, and he said, Orange was seen socializing with people backstage. He's seemingly fine. Everyone kind of feels like he should be good to go for the pay-per-view. Although Meltzer was a little bit more cautious, saying like, he could wake up tomorrow and feel terrible, and they could discover that he's got some neck injury they didn't diagnose the night before. So, but kind of what you're hearing from backstage is that the injury was maybe not as significant as it appeared on screen. But again, it might take a couple of days for us to really know that. Dave Meltzer also mentioned that it had always been the plan to get to a triple threat match at Double or Nothing. So that didn't change based on Orange Cassidy's injury. That had always been the planned world title match for Double or Nothing. They just had to take a different way to get there. How they had originally planned to get there was that the match between Orange Cassidy and Pac would go to a 20-minute draw, a 20-minute time limit draw. And they actually weren't that, I think it was like 14 minutes or something like that. They weren't that far away from it. So in the end, if Orange Cassidy is okay, which it sounds like he is, although I don't know if you can be 100% about that right now, but it sounds like it's not going to be as serious as it looked and that he's going to be okay for the pay-per-view. That's very positive stuff for AEW. That means really there are not going to be long-term storytelling consequences to how things played out on Dynamite last night. And so now I started to think, okay, well, Orange Cassidy is going to challenge for the World Championship on the pay-per-view. And you think about how popular Orange Cassidy is, how much merchandise he sells. And, he does good TV ratings, I'm assuming, anyway. I haven't done like a breakdown of Orange Cassidy's TV ratings, but he's obviously a very popular guy. But the idea with Orange Cassidy is like, he's so comedy based and he's so sort of silly and unique. You almost wonder, can you put him in these sort of world title like situations? But then you go back to his feud with Chris Jericho, that trilogy of matches that he did. And I thought that feud, that rivalry, along with his previous pay-per-view match last year with Pac, that, like, they have figured out how to put Orange Cassidy in serious situations while keeping the essence of the character. And I wonder what the odds are that one day Orange Cassidy is going to win the world title. I mean, he has a chance at Double or Nothing. But throughout his career, do you think Orange Cassidy might win the world title? He might. He doesn't seem like someone you put the world title on, but it's like it could happen. I mean, who knows what's going to happen throughout the next 10 years? I mean, heck, they could even put it on him at Double or Nothing, although I don't know if the odds are in his favor of coming away from Double or Nothing with the world title. I wouldn't imagine that the odds are in his favor. And, you know, Orange Cassidy winning the TNT Championship is something that could happen as well. But this is a big, big moment in Orange Cassidy's career to be in a match so important on a major pay-per-view. And it almost came crashing down on him last night on Dynamite, but it appears as though he dodged a bullet, and we are going to see Orange Cassidy challenge for the world title at Double or Nothing. We've got more updates about Double or Nothing as well. It was a pretty notable episode of Dynamite in terms of scheduling matches for the pay-per-view last night. So let's move on to our next story now. All right. In the main event of AEW Dynamite last night, Miro defeated Darby Allen to win the TNT Championship. In our last video, we had talked about how this was a really important match for both guys. For Darby Allen, this TNT title run has been fantastic for him. I think throughout this run, we've really seen, hey, Darby Allen, he's going to main event numerous episodes of Dynamite. He's going to be a big player on pay-per-view. He's a guy that people are going to tune in to see. Darby Allen, over the course of this TNT title reign, has become a much bigger star, in my opinion. But his title reign came to an end last night as Miro wins his first title in AEW. Now, the match that they had reminded me a little bit of the match between Hangman Page and Brian Cage from a couple of weeks ago, when Brian Cage knocked Hangman Page out of the number one contendership spot. I think that was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. No, it wasn't Blood and Guts. It was before that. It reminded me of that match a little bit. If you remember, Brian Cage attacked Hangman Page before the bell and then just tore through him as the match went on. Very similar thing here between Miro and Darby Allen. Miro attacked him before the match. But also factoring into this was the attack that Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky gave Darby Allin last week, throwing him down the flight of stairs. So coming into this match, it was very much established before the bell rang that Darby Allin was at a significant disadvantage. He had the injuries from last week, and he was attacked before the bell. So Miro won. Miro won with the game over thing. Is he calling it that? Is that what it's called? The game over? I think it's called the game over. Referee calls for the bell pretty quickly. Miro, who came out to the ring in like shorts that were the colors of the TNT title. Like he was coming out like, I am winning this title. And I thought that sort of confidence that his character had was pretty telling. You know, like that amount of confidence that he's just going to come in and steamroll over Darby Allin. And so with this victory, I wanted to take a look at TNT Championship Statistics. So this title is about to turn 1 year old. The first TNT title match took place at last year's Double or Nothing, and it was the tournament final between Cody and Lance Archer, with Cody Rhodes becoming the first ever TNT champion. So up on your screen right now is Cody's run from May 23rd, 2020 to August 13th, 2020. And he really was a fighting champion during this time. So just on the next Dynamite episode of Dynamite after winning the title, he beats Jungle Boy. If you remember, he kind of went through a period where he was beating all these young up-and-comers. So he goes through Jungle Boy, Mark Quinn from Private Party. Ricky Starks. That was before Ricky Starks had even signed with the promotion. He beat Jake Hager at Fyter Fest. Sonny Kiss. Eddie Kingston. Remember, he beat Eddie Kingston. So Eddie Kingston and Ricky Starks both came to AEW on, this sort of like, all right, you can come and face Cody and see if you can get over. Warhorse. Cody also beat Warhorse, and he beat Scorpio Sky until he ran into Mr. Brody Lee and got his butt kicked in just over 3 minutes, and then he lost that title. So Brody Lee then became the second champion, and he only held on to the title for a couple of months. He defeated Dustin Rhodes on September 9th, 2020, and on September 23rd, 2020, he defeated Orange Cassidy for the TNT title. And then, very sadly, Mr. Brody Lee's last ever match in wrestling, October 7th, 2020, an amazing dog collar match. Like, I loved that match between Cody and Brody Lee. I thought it was awesome. And then when Brody was just gone like for 2 months and we didn't get any updates, I remember just thinking like, he's just selling that this match was so physically taxing on him. And unfortunately, just horrible tragedy was actually taking place during that time. And, really sad stuff. But so Cody's second reign with the title didn't last very long at all. It actually only lasted exactly a month. He went to a time limit draw with Orange Cassidy. Then he defeated Orange Cassidy in a Lumberjack match before losing to Darby Allen at Full Gear 2020. So in total here, Cody, his title defenses, he had 2 in his second reign, and he had 8 in his first reign. So 10 total TNT title defenses, successful title defenses for Cody, 2 for Brody Lee. Then Darby Allen comes in. Darby Allen had 8 successful title defenses, which ties Cody's record that he sent with his first title reign. So Darby Allen defeated Cody Rhodes at Full Gear, as we said. He then defended the title successfully against Brian Cage at New Year's Smash. He defeated Joey Janela, Scorpio Sky, John Silver, JD Drake, Matt Hardy, Jungle Boy, 10 from the Dark Order before losing it to Miro on Dynamite last night. So in 1 year of this title, we've had 4 people hold it. 5 reigns, 4 champions. So far, Cody leads the stats in terms of title defenses. Darby Allen holds the record in terms of days spent with the title. Darby Allen also holds the record for most days spent in a single reign. Cody and Darby Allen are tied for the most title defenses in a single reign. So, pretty cool stuff there. I don't know. I think the TNT title has been handled fairly well over the last year. And now Miro. Miro is someone that has never lost. And he's been on the losing side of matches in AEW, but he's never lost a singles match. He's never been pinned or submitted in AEW. So if you just go up on your screen right now, he's actually only had 7 singles matches. He's defeated Trent, Sonny Kiss, Chuck Taylor, Fuego del Sol, Hayden Backlund, Will Alday, and then Darby Allen. So Miro is someone it's taken them a little bit to kind of put Miro where they want him to be. It did seem like when he was doing that video game thing with Kip Sabian, that was kind of a way to have him on the show, but out of the title pictures a little bit. So if he was on the losing side of a match, it was generally Kip Sabian that was taking the pin. But now we have to wonder what happens next between Miro and Darby Allen. Does Darby Allen get a rematch? Does that rematch take place at Double or Nothing? And then who wins that between Darby Allen and Miro? Miro, as we said, never been pinned, never submitted. That's going to be a big deal when that finally happens. It'll be interesting to see if Darby Allen is the one to finally make that happen at Double or Nothing. On the other hand, Miro beating Darby Allen 2 matches in a row would be fairly significant as well. But it seems like they have to do something to make up for the disadvantage Darby Allen was at in the match last night. He went into it injured after having been thrown downstairs, and he was attacked before the bell. So maybe there's some stipulation they could add to a rematch between the two that would help prevent that disadvantage from befelling Darby Allen again. On the other hand, it's possible that Darby Allen figures that, hey, I got to deal with Ethan Page or Scorpio Sky before I even think about going back to that for that TNT title again. They were the ones that threw me down the stairs last week. They then took out Sting at ringside during my match this week. So who knows where we're going with the TNT title? All we know is that Miro is your new AEW TNT champion. If you think Miro's a great champion, a great guy to hold the belt, let us know in the comments section below. And also last night on Dynamite, we had the IWGP United States Championship defended as Jon Moxley took on Eugene Nagata. And this is one of the bigger examples of the forbidden door in wrestling swinging open. You've got a guy like Eugene Nagata. He's a legend in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And he's wrestling against the current IWGP United States champion on Dynamite. They've helped build up this match on New Japan Strong. And it's sort of like the reverse of what happened with Kenta, right? Like they built up the match between Moxley and Kenta on Dynamite, and then Moxley and Kenta had the match for the US title on New Japan Strong. So it seems like that was just like, you know, a straight up trade. It's like, hey, we'll build up a match for you on New Japan Strong if you help build up a match for us on Dynamite, and we'll lend our guys to each other. So definitely some agreement is taking place, and definitely some discussions between AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. So it's going to be interesting to see where this Forbidden Door stuff goes in the post-pandemic era. Because we know New Japan would like to get back to touring in the United States or doing more in the United States. Of course, I mean, we'll get to New Japan in a second, but unfortunately they are shut down in Japan. So that Will Ospreay versus Kazuchika Okada match we thought we were getting in the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Grand Slam, I don't know when we're getting that now. We all just kind of got to sit back and be patient and hope for good things in Japan and hope that we can get those matches and New Japan can go back on the road. But, you know, I mean, we've got some guys wrestling for New Japan Strong. We had Yuji Nagata on Dynamite here, so we are getting some New Japan Pro Wrestling anyway. But so Moxley and Yuji Nagata had this match. I thought Nagata got in a fairly significant amount of offense. I also like that they showed Rocky Romero in the crowd. I mean, like Rocky Romero is like the symbol of the bridge between New Japan Pro Wrestling and sort of English-speaking wrestlers and wrestling fans. So having him there, I thought was pretty cool. So Moxley beats Yuji Nagata. It's just, you know, it's a great match. Like I said, Nagata got a lot of offense in, and then afterwards they were very respectful to each other. But that's not the last that we would see of Jon Moxley or Eddie Kingston later in the show. They would then continue to build up their feud with the Elite. And we'll get more into that. But what happened between the Elite and Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston took place after, I think it took place after. Well, anyway, the Young Bucks also took on SCU on the show with the stipulation that, well, this is something that SCU, Kazarian and Daniels had talked about, God, like months ago. They had said, look, the next time me and you lose a 2-on-2 tag team title match, that's it. That's our last match together as a team. And these guys have been teaming forever. You know, Christopher Daniels is now over 50. I mean, he really put on a stellar performance in this match. You know, so it's one of those things where, like, look, he still can go, but yeah, maybe that's not what he wants to do anymore. You know, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he definitely didn't say that he's done for sure. He sent out a tweet, if I remember. I'll put it up on your screen right now. But it was basically saying like that might be it. And I feel like he might be saying that because it would be a great note to go out on. But we'll see, obviously. I thought this was a fantastic match with a lot of story to it. The big story I felt was at one point, I think it was Matt Jackson gave a super kick to Christopher Daniels while Daniels' head was leaning up against the steel post. And this busted him open big time. And it felt like for a very long time in this match afterwards that Christopher Daniels just wasn't going to be in the match. He was done. And that, it seemed almost like symbolic to me, as if that this was sort of saying like Christopher Daniels, he can't go in this match anymore, and he's left his partner all alone. Maybe the symbolism there is that Christopher Daniels is slowing down, and maybe he's putting his partner at a disadvantage. So maybe Christopher Daniels' time is over, whereas Frankie Kazarian still is more left in the tank. I don't know. That was just me drawing some, or just speculating on what that sort of period in the match could have been meant to communicate. Of course, Daniels did come back and did get back involved in the match again. He bled on Matt Jackson's Jordan shoes. And that was something that they'd clearly sort of wanted to get across, that Matt Jackson was all upset that Christopher Daniels got his blood on his super expensive Air Jordans. And so then he also mocked the Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels WrestleMania moment with the I'm sorry, I love you, but he did it in a very sarcastic way. And then the Bucks were able to finish them off with that double knee finish that they do. And with that, the Bucks was it a title match? I can't remember. Anyway, the Bucks defeat SCU, and SCU has to disband as a team. Oh, one other thing. There was Daniels did one of his best moonsaults ever during the match. And he sort of slipped at first, but he was all beat up and whatever. So it almost worked like, oh, he was too out of it and groggy and tired. But then he just went up and he hit the best moonsault ever. And that was one of the best moonsault ever I think I've ever seen. Yeah, he just landed really flush on his opponent. And so we'll see if that's it for Christopher Daniels. But if it is, like, what a career. Like, if your career lasts from where you were on WCW Nitro a couple of times to now you're on AEW Dynamite, you had a good career. Later in the show, the Young Bucks challenge Moxley and Kingston to a match at Double or Nothing. But before they challenged them to a match at Double or Nothing, I like that they said, hey, we're going to defend the titles against the Varsity Blondes next week. The Varsity Blondes are the number 2 ranked team, and after having beat the first ranked team. So I liked that because Kingston and Moxley haven't done enough to earn a tag title match. Right? Like, they just haven't won enough matches. So it would be unfair to other teams that are ranked higher than them to get a title shot ahead of them. But if the Young Bucks have just knocked off the number 1 and number 2 contenders, then in theory, hey, maybe they can call their shot for the pay-per-view. They're like, we just beat the number 1 contenders, and then the following week, we're going to take on the number 2 contenders. That should clear up our schedule where we should be allowed to just pick our opponents for the pay-per-view. And they're going to pick Moxley and Kingston. So I thought that was pretty cool. Also, last night on AEW Dynamite, we had the latest in the rivalry between the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle. So a few notes here. Pinnacle came out. Maxwell Jacob Friedman is wearing a crown. They're celebrating that they defeated the Inner Circle. They're having a great time, but they are interrupted by the Inner Circle. Now, before we get into what happened, I just want to mention Chris Jericho put out an episode of Talk is Jericho where he talks for an hour just by himself about this match. And he talked a bit about how some fans expressed online that they felt that the spot at the end looked a little too fake. It looked a little bit too much like he was falling onto a mattress or some crash pads. Jericho kind of went into details. Like, there was like a 6-inch mat I fell onto and a bunch of just like hollow cardboard boxes. Empty cardboard boxes. I guess hollow cardboard boxes are empty. And he talked about how, like, look, if you thought this looked too safe, like I don't care, basically, was kind of what he said. It was dangerous. And if you look, like, I almost overshot everything and hit my head on the lights on the stage. So kind of like as if saying, like, I'm sorry you thought this looked too fake, but what do you want, really? Do you want it to look real and be even more dangerous? I guess some people do want that. Personally, I would rather know that a wrestler isn't endangering their life for the end of the match. I don't really think that anyone needs to go that length in 2021. And I would imagine that, most fans in 2021, and let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree. Actually, just let me know if you agree. If you disagree, I don't care. Most fans in 2021 would rather see Chris Jericho fall onto empty cardboard boxes than they would watch Mick Foley get thrown off the top of the cell and really land on a hard table and floor. We know a little bit more about the impacts these moves can have on wrestlers later in life. We know enough about that now that I think it would be weird to want that now. But anyway, so he went on about this, but another thing that he talked about on his podcast was about how a lot of people were like, why are they doing War Games now? Like, War Games should be this big blow-off to the feud, right? Like, it's the big war that settles the score, to go back to the rock and wrestling era. But Jericho talked about how, like, him and Tony Khan talked about how, well, why? Why can't it be the kickoff to the feud? And it seemed like it was weird that they would do War Games at the start of the feud. But as it turns out, it's because they had another idea of what they want to do at Double or Nothing. And the Inner Circle challenged the Pinnacle to a Stadium Stampede match. But Maxwell Jacob Friedman said, we're only agreeing to that if the stipulation is, if we beat you at Stadium Stampede, the Inner Circle has to disband forever. And so then that gives motivation for the Pinnacle to accept the match, right? Because right now, I mean, as MJF said to the crowd last night, like, he asked them if they wanted a rematch, and MJF was like, no, you're not getting a rematch. And what would his motivation for giving them a rematch be anyway? They already won the match. Well, this is their motivation. They now have the opportunity to end the Inner Circle. And so now we are getting Stadium Stampede 2. And it was kind of cool. After Stadium Stampede last year, Tony Khan had mentioned that they do sort of want to make this a signature event for the promotion. And I mean, Stadium Stampede, like, that was a big deal last year. That was a big cinematic match. And it's going to be weird, because where do cinematic matches go now that live crowds are coming back? And of course, AEW announced that they are returning to live shows. The first one on July 7th. Oh, I can't wait. I think they're going to have capacity crowd on May 30th, but they're moving out of Daly's place in July. So, I mean, that's great. And doesn't that just sort of like provide this kind of like new stage we've hit now in the pandemic, where we're starting to get like stuff's starting to come back. We're getting these live shows and stuff. So that's great. And now we've got this second big war, this second big faction battle between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle. And I remember when Chris Jericho came out, and I said on the video last week, I'm like, what is Chris Jericho doing on the show? Like, shouldn't he be off selling this injury? But he came out, his arm was all in a super robotic cast. And if they're doing this big match at Double or Nothing, you only got like 2-3 shows. I mean, Double or Nothing's May 30th. It's May, yeah, so they only have like 2 shows to build it up. So he kind of had to come back. Like, if you're doing that match on the pay-per-view, he had to come back to build up Stadium Stampede. And then they sprayed him down with the bubbly or whatever like that. It was, I don't know how often we're going to get these in wrestling, where like Austin hoses people down with the beer, or Kurt Angle hoses people down with milk, or Chris Jericho hoses people down with the bubbly. But I guess this is a standard multi-generational segment now where people get hosed down with different beverages. But I thought it was a fun segment last night, and I'm super looking forward to Stadium Stampede. If you're looking forward to Stadium Stampede or have any comments at all about the Inner Circle and Pinnacle feud, let us know in the comments section below. So Cody cut a rather dramatic promo last night. Cody is a rather dramatic guy, and I mean that in a good way. I know not everybody is going to see it in a good way, but Cody is very passionate, and he is very passionate about he's passionate about everything, right? And we started to get that Cody is sort of passionately patriotic as well. He's sort of expressed that a little bit before too. I wasn't really too sold on the theme of this promo up until the very end. And then I was like, okay, now I buy into everything. But so he starts this promo talking about how Anthony Gogo has been running down the United States. I don't remember that. I guess maybe it's been happening on his commentary on Dark. I do watch Dark. But anyway, it could have been that Anthony Gogo sort of covered up the guy in the Union Jack there. Like put the Union Jack over Cody. Maybe that was what started this whole patriotic thing Cody was doing. You know, like Cody was like, oh, he really went off on a very patriotic speech talking about how Anthony Gogo was running down the United States. And then so Cody starts propping up the United States. And the whole time I'm going like, doesn't this feud have to do with the Nightmare family and QT Marshall's crew splitting away? And why all of a sudden are we doing a July 4th speech? I don't fully understand. But it was Cody, and Cody does everything with the passion level turned up to like 800. And it's really interesting the similarities and sort of differences between the Rhodeses, between Dusty Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, and Dustin Rhodes. Because they all have this thing in them. They all have this like very passionate approach to pro wrestling. And Cody's approach is very old school too, which is funny because for Dustin, a lot of the time when he was doing Goldust, it was like Goldust is like the edgy and trying to get away from his dad's shadow and trying to be this really new school and ahead of his time type character. Then Cody comes in and Cody's all old school. He's like, bring it back. Whatever comparisons between me and my dad are super fine by me. I welcome them. But they're all connected by the way that they are just prone to these passionate speeches. And I just think that all three of them throughout their careers put like so much of themselves into what they were doing, right? Like not one of them has ever half-assed anything. Like if you look at Cody Rhodes, look at how hard he tried at Stardust. He did not phone that in. He did everything he could think of to do with Stardust. They gave him nothing to work with, and he put all of himself into it. And so now he's in a position where he can kind of do what he wants, and he can do things that he's passionate about with the same level of passion that he puts into things that he's not passionate about. You know what I mean? Like now he's able to call his shots a little bit, and that's why Cody's stuff always seems so dramatic. I mean, his ring entrance is dramatic. He's got like 5 things that happen before his ring music starts. We're told that the Rhodeses or the McMahons aren't the only royal family, or I think he removed that. Then there's all this gate opening stuff and some other stuff on the screen, and then finally his music hits. Like everything he does is a little over the top. But that's just who Cody is, and that's what this promo was. It was very dramatic. It was very passionate. He talked about his child that is going to be born soon, and all of it was working to this big reveal that he did, and I thought he did this so perfect. The way he said, "I'm going to be referred to as the American Dream for this match," so he's just going to like this whole promo was just announcing that he's going to be announced as the American Dream, Cody Rhodes, at the pay-per-view when he faces Anthony Gogo. And I got goosebumps. Like when he gave a dramatic pause and then looked at the screen and said, the American Dream, Cody Rhodes. Like, that's just something, like, even right now, I'm getting a little tingly in my arms. I'm like, oh, my goodness. He's going to use his dad's nickname. Oh, in a match against a guy who punches people in the stomach. This is going to be incredible. But that's just how passionate Cody is. And it's interesting now because I was a big Goldust fan, like, back in the day. And, you know, have gone back and watched all the classic Dusty Rhodes stuff. And to see Cody doing what he's doing now, he's the most Rhodes of any of them. And we'll see what happens at this pay-per-view. Little worried that Cody might not win this match at the pay-per-view against Anthony Gogo. We haven't seen Anthony Gogo a whole lot. And when we do see him, all he does is punch people in the stomach. But that punch seems to really hurt those people. So we'll just see. I mean, how well Anthony Gogo does in this match will really depend on how much confidence AEW has in Anthony Gogo to be put in similar big matches in the future. And we're going to find that out at Double or Nothing. I think if Cody can come away with a victory over Anthony Gogo, it really, like, maybe if he beats Anthony Gogo, maybe he moves on from the feud with QT Marshall's faction after this and challenges Miro for the TNT title or something like that. But big match for both Anthony Gogo and Cody Rhodes at Double or Nothing. If you're looking forward to seeing that match or have more to say about Cody Rhodes being the American Dream or the promo he cut on Dynamite, let us know in the comments section below. All right, and the last bit from AEW this week. Let's run down the matches for next week and the matches that we've got so far for Double or Nothing on May 30th. So for next week, we have the tag team titles are on the line as the Young Bucks defend against Brian Pillman Jr. and Griff Garrison, the Varsity Blondes. If you haven't checked out the Dark Side of the Ring on Brian Pillman Sr., it's very good. And Brian Pillman Jr. is in it. And, you know, if you've seen a lot of documentaries on Brian Pillman, which I have, you might be thinking like, oh, you know, I know this guy's story. Do I need to watch it again? What's different from this documentary from other times that this story has been told, I think, is Brian Pillman Jr. is in it. And he talks a lot about how this impacted him growing up. And you really, at the end of that documentary, I was really left going like, I want to see Brian Pillman Jr. succeed in wrestling so bad. Well, he's got an AEW tag team title match next week. It's the biggest match in his career, I would have to say. He did some cool stuff in MLW as well, but this is the biggest match in his AEW career. I mean, it's the biggest match in his career. It's on a national stage. He's taking on the Young Bucks, the best tag team in the world. And as we said previously, the Young Bucks having this match is why they can face an unranked team at Double or Nothing. They took out SCU, the number 1 ranked team this week. Varsity Blondes, top ranked team. They take them out. Then it's like, okay, well, you can call your shot then. You've done your, you've fulfilled your responsibilities as champions because you've taken on the top contender. So yeah, if you want to just take on your rivals at the pay-per-view, great. Go for it. All right then. Also next week, Serena Deeb is returning. I just binge watched a bunch of episodes of National Wrestling Alliance on Fight. By the way, highly recommend it. It's just, it's like $6.50 in Canada. I don't know what it is outside a month. So it's like $2 per show of Power. And if you really like their style, which I do, just strip away the bells and the whistles, shorter matches, more simplistic stuff. This might be the wrestling promotion that you like the best. So I definitely recommend giving the NWA a shot. So Serena Deeb, she'll defend the NWA title next week against Red Velvet. Red Velvet, really someone who has come up over this last year as someone AEW really trusts in big matches. Obviously, she teamed with Cody to go up against Jade Cargill and Shaquille O'Neal. They needed someone they could trust in that match. And Red Velvet has won them over for sure. So she's in another big match next week. Serena Deeb, if you remember, she had a great match with Riho not long ago that did like monster ratings. So Serena Deeb being back, she just had like a little bit of a knee injury. So her being back is great for AEW. It's also great for the NWA. Also, Christian Cage versus Matt Sydal take place next week. And Anthony Gogo will be in singles action against Austin Gunn. So we've got more QT Marshall's Factory versus the Nightmare Family in action on Dynamite. But let's take a look at what we've got for Double or Nothing. We've got about like 5 matches confirmed and then like 7 where you basically know it's going to happen. So we've got the triple threat match for the AEW World Championship. That was confirmed last night. Kenny Omega versus Orange Cassidy and Pac. 2 weeks ago, it was confirmed AEW Women's World Championship match. Hikaru Shida versus Dr. Britt Baker. And what I think is the biggest title match that the division has had so far. It feels that way. You've got a champion who's been champion for a year. And you've got Britt Baker, who's been, as she says, the face of the division, the role model for a year. So it's like the best wrestler in the division versus like the most well-known wrestler in the division. And it really does feel like this is sort of the coming together of the division hitting its stride, where you can take a look at it and go, Hikaru Shida versus Britt Baker. That's going to be excellent. That's going to be an excellent match. It's going to be an excellent story. I'm interested to see what happens. This title feels important. It feels like it would be a huge accomplishment for Britt Baker to win it. It feels like what Hikaru Shida has done with the title is impressive. So the title feels more important now than it ever has since AEW started. I'm interested to see what happens between Hikaru Shida and Britt Baker. We've got a singles match, Cody Rhodes versus Anthony Gogo. The American Dream, Cody Rhodes versus Anthony Gogo. The Casino Battle Royale, where the winner will earn a future AEW World Championship. Confirmed for the match so far, Christian Cage and Matt Sydal. We had a match. I don't know if this is confirmed, but Paige challenged Brian Cage to a match. So Paige versus Cage. 2 weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, if you remember, it was Brian Cage knocked Hangman Page out of the #1 contendership by beating him in singles action. However, he only beat him because he attacked him before the match, and that sort of set the tone. So now Hangman Page with a chance to avenge that loss to Brian Cage. That loss to Brian Cage is the reason why Hangman Page is not in the world title picture moving into Double or Nothing. So he's got a little bit of motivation to take on Team Taz. And if Team Taz starts getting in Hangman Page's business, I would imagine the Dark Order, who really appreciate being such good friends with Hangman Page, I would imagine they will have his back. Assuming that the Young Bucks beat the Varsity Blondes next week and retain the titles, it will be a tag team title match between the Young Bucks and Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston next week. And then, although this match hasn't been accepted or like confirmed, obviously, it seems very likely we'll get the Stadium Stampede match between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle. Unless next week Chris Jericho says, well, we considered your stipulation and we won't accept. So we'll move on and we just won't have a match at the pay-per-view. I somehow don't think that's going to happen. So let us know in the comment section what you think the most exciting match coming up at Double or Nothing will be. So here's some breaking news for you. Zelina Vega is expected back in WWE. What? If you remember, Zelina Vega was released from the company in November, and there had been a big public, let's say, a brouhaha between her and WWE over this new policy WWE announced at the time where their independent contractors would not be permitted to work with third parties such as Twitch and Cameo. And Zelina Vega was like, okay, I make more money at those things, so goodbye. Well, according to Fightful, Zelina Vega was at the WWE Performance Center today, and that she is expected to return to the company. Now, this is all coming from anonymous sources again, so frequent viewers of this video know that anonymous sources in wrestling media, often the truth gets heavily bent in these situations. Certain, people sending informations have motivations we're not aware of and things like that. So you have to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But that being said, I mean, this isn't like a report. I was like, oh, well, we hear a rumor she's coming back. She was at the Performance Center. It seems like that probably did take place. But again, we don't really know. And what they've been told is that the idea is that she will be returning to the company. Now, 2 months ago, like everybody had wanted Zelina Vega to go to AEW. And then 2 months ago in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer wrote that she actually can't go to AEW right now. She signed a short-term deal with the company. We don't even know if this is a wrestling company or not. And that is going to prevent her from showing up in AEW imminently. And this was just such a vague, cryptic report that it's like, I don't even know what we can take from this. If this report of Zelina Vega being at the Performance Center is true, like maybe there were things being worked out between WWE and Zelina Vega behind the scenes for a few months, and she just needed to kind of put those AEW rumors at bay for a little bit, and so she was like, I can't right now, just give me a few months or something like that. Maybe something like that happened. This is all just speculation. All that we know is that there are reports she was at the Performance Center today, and there are also reports saying people are expecting her to return to the company. Whether or not this is actually the case, we can't say for sure, but it would be a very interesting development. Little MLW note this week. If you remember last week, we talked a little bit about this Azteca Underground thing that's going on in Major League Wrestling. They brought in the former Dario Cueto from Lucha Underground. He's now known under a different name. They've been referring to him as El Jefe. But now Court Bauer and Jacob Fatu were on Sean Waltman's podcast recently, his new one, the Pro Wrestling for Life, and they hinted that Azteca Underground, and while right now it's a faction in MLW, the idea is that it's going to become a second MLW show. Might not even be an MLW show. It might just be branded Azteca Underground. Now, previously, MLW has sort of referred to Azteca Underground as like the spiritual successor to Lucha Underground. And so it would have sort of many of the same themes, things like that. We know Krista Joseph, who used to be the head writer for Lucha Underground, him and Court Bauer have worked together before. I think they were both writers in WWE at the same time. Krista Joseph was brought into MLW for a little bit before returning to WWE. So, I don't know, maybe I don't know if there's a possibility of him helping out with this Azteca Underground show. But Court Bauer did mention on this podcast that he has received offers, or they're in negotiations for Azteca Underground being a second MLW brand, if you will. And if you remember Lucha Underground, it was very creative, very interesting. So I'm very interested to see where MLW and Court Bauer go with this Azteca Underground. I would very much like to see sort of something similar to Lucha Underground being back on the air, maybe on Vice TV. And finally, just before we go for this week, it is WrestleMania Backlash on Sunday. And there are 6 matches announced for the show thus far. Let's run down the card and see what we have in store come Sunday on pay-per-view. So a match that was just announced this week, or maybe last week, I can't remember. Lumberjack match between Damien Priest and The Miz. This is a fairly significant match for Damien Priest. I mean, The Miz was WWE champion earlier this year. So Priest getting a win over a former WWE champion on pay-per-view, that'd be a significant victory for him. And sort of establish him as a guy sort of upper mid-card kind of thing. You know, not in the main event. He's not there yet. But a win over The Miz, I think, would establish Priest as a guy that is someone WWE is willing to push. Let's say that. Also, we got a triple threat match for the WWE Championship as Bobby Lashley defends against Drew McIntyre and Braun Strowman. You have to wonder, I mean, Does Drew McIntyre get another singles match against Bobby Lashley? Does this title go back on Drew McIntyre? And if so, when? Is it here? Is it in a singles match? I'm not certain. At some point in this rivalry between Lashley and Drew McIntyre, somebody's going to walk away with the title while the other person moves out of the title picture. And I don't know who it's going to be between Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. If Drew needs to win back the title within the next couple of months. Like, we're not doing Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley at SummerSlam again. That just seems like that's too long for that feud to be going on. I mean, maybe, but we'll see. I think whoever walks away from this match as the WWE champion, it's going to be very telling, but I still feel like we need another singles match between Lashley and McIntyre. I don't know. I mean, then again, everything could be thrown for a loop if Strowman wins the title here, which he could. Who knows? All right. Also, a very important match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bianca Belair, her first big title defense up against Bayley. You kind of wonder, where is Sasha Banks in all this? I have heard rumors that a new season of The Mandalorian is filming, so that might be where she is. But it is kind of, Bianca Belair after beating Sasha Banks at WrestleMania, and then Bayley, Sasha Banks' longtime friend, rival, frenemy. So Bianca Belair facing Bayley in her first title match is fairly significant. If you remember, Bayley was the PWI Wrestler of the Year, or Female Wrestler of the Year for 2020. She held that SmackDown title for most of the year last year up until she lost it to Banks. Then we got a triple threat match for the Raw Women's Championship. Rhea Ripley, Asuka, and Charlotte Flair. Both of these triple threats for the WWE Championship and the Raw Women's Championship. So both of the Raw triple threats feels like we're kind of like just killing time before we get those big rematches. Like, it still feels like we need a Lashley versus McIntyre rematch, and it still feels like we need a Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair rematch from last year's WrestleMania, and we still need a Rhea Ripley Asuka rematch. We were going to get one on Raw, but then Charlotte Flair interrupted it, so we've never gotten that Rhea Ripley Asuka rematch. So yeah, it feels like a couple of singles. I'm not sure which is going to be the next big singles match in the Raw Women's division, but maybe we'll find out more on Sunday. For the SmackDown Tag Team titles, the Dirty Dogs, Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode will defend the title against the father-son team of Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio. I bet you that's a better match than it sounds. Because, Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode, whenever we see them wrestle, it's like a 5-minute SmackDown match. But they're both good wrestlers. Rey Mysterio's like the best wrestler. And his son is really good for a guy who's only been wrestling for like a year. Perhaps some of that has to do with him sharing DNA with his father. So that match could be better than maybe it sounds like it will be. And then for the Universal Championship, Roman Reigns defending against Cesaro. Cesaro's first ever singles match for the Universal title. And we'll just have to see how well Cesaro does in this match here. And that is everything. You are now completely up to date with everything that is important in the world of pro wrestling. Thanks so much for supporting these videos. You can continue to support these videos by clicking the like button, sharing this video with a friend, and of course subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thanks again, everyone. I'm Ian, reporting for Channel 4 Wrestling News.